All right, so let's get into this. First thing we're going to do is uninstall our front brake. Just take these front two bolts off. And now what is supposed to happen is we heat up this bottom Allen bolt, stick your Allen wrench in, and it should break free. That didn't quite happen for me. So heated it up a couple more times, tried to break it free, wasn't going. What I ended up doing was softening the metal and then stripping out the Allen head. So I used a screw retrieval tool to try and spin it out. And as you can see, that didn't really work either. So after about an hour of trying to get it out, I ended up calling Bruce over at Bruce's Suspension. He said use a chisel. And lo and behold, after 3 or 4 hits, loosens right up. So I went ahead and used a chisel on the other side too, because I started to strip that after trying to heat it up and after trying to just work an Allen wrench in there. Took a few more hits, but eventually we got it loose. All right, we're just going to remove the axle cap here so we can loosen up the axle and then drive that axle out so we can pull out the front wheel. Finally, we just need to remove this brake hose from the clamp, and we're going to be able to get the forks out after we loosen up all the triple clamp bolts here. Once all your bolts are removed, go ahead and slide your forks out. Then we can loosen up our seal covers. You'll want to do that for later on. And unscrew our top cap so we can drain out the oil. Now throw your finger over the top so not everything comes out at once. But you'll be able to pull out a sleeve. And then a little washer will pop out too that sits on top of that spring. Don't lose it in the oil because you'll need that to put back in later. And there it is. You can find it in the oil. And once all the oil is drained out, we can unscrew that bottom Allen bolt and put our guide rod up through the bottom. Now, this worked great on one fork, but on my other fork, that little bronze piece you see is a crush washer. If this doesn't come out, you'll have to pull that out with a pair of needle nose pliers because we'll need that later to put on the new Allen bolts going up through the extenders and flutes. Once everything's drained, you should be able to just push your guide rod through, and then that flute will pop right out of your fork and pull off this top piece here. Bruce calls this a piston ring cover, and it's going to go on our new flute. So here's everything that you need to, the internals that you need to put in your new fork. We're going to unscrew this Allen bolt from our flute extender. Make sure you put that crush washer on that Allen bolt. Do not lose it. Otherwise, your fork will be leaking oil later on. Go ahead and put that ring on top of your new flute and the extender and spring, that short spring that came out on the new flute as well. From here, we can put everything on the guide rod, just our flute extender, then our spring and flute will drop right down in there. We'll put our new heavier duty spring in the fork with the washer sitting on top of it, and then screw our cap back in. Now, obviously, we haven't put oil or anything in those forks yet, but first we need to put all the internals in, seal it up to get pressure down on the flute so that we can put the Allen bolt in the bottom. Otherwise, it'll just kind of spin. So make sure you put some Loctite, blue Loctite, on that Allen bolt. Now we can just flip that fork upside down, pull the guide rod out, and stick our Allen bolt in, screw it nice and tight. Well, I couldn't find a proper foot-pound number For that bolt, when I talked to Bruce, he said about 12 to 15 foot-pounds. All right, now we can go ahead and get our oil in the fork. So you're going to want to remove the top cap and then remove the spring that we just put in. My fork's called for about 605 cc's of oil, but we also want it to be about 130 millimeters or 13 centimeters from the top. Now, going back and doing the editing, I see why some videos skip this step. There are definitely some jokes to be made about how this goes in. Once you get about 3/4 of the oil in the fork, you're going to want to compress it and pull it back up, back and forth to get the oil drop down into that flute until you feel about equal resistance from pulling and pushing that fork. Go ahead and pour the rest of your oil in, do it a few more times, and then I just measured from the top 13 centimeters to make sure that the proper level of oil was in. I had a little bit extra, had to dump some out once or twice, but eventually hit that 13 centimeter mark pretty quickly. All right, once you got the oil where you need it, go ahead and put your spring back in. Don't forget the washer on top of the spring, and then screw your cap back on top. Now we're good to put our forks back on the bike. For my left side, they're pretty tight, and it stayed without having to use a pinch bolt. For my right side, that did not work, so I needed to go ahead and pinch that down to get it to stay. Make sure your forks are even from the top, and then go ahead and tighten up all your triple clamp bolts. From here, we're just going to put everything back together and bolt everything up snug. Don't over tighten anything, and we'll go back and do everything to spec. I'll go ahead and put all of the kind of foot-pounds down on the video description, as well as just a link to the manual page. It kind of has every spec that you would need. Make sure that you do not over tighten these post bolts because they will break pretty easily. I think the spec was like 9 foot-pounds. Another thing to remember here is on the front brake, you have 2 Allen bolts that look fairly similar. One's a little bit longer than the other. The longer one does go on top. If you put the shorter one on top, that longer one will actually go through your disc. Wheel won't spin. Again, these are 9 foot-pounds, so do not over tighten those because if you break one, it's not a good day.